You can laugh at a man's clothes, but you'll never know the weight of the promises he carries. The laughter started before Ethan Brooks had even reached the registration table. It rolled through the polished lobby of Sterling Global headquarters like a wave that refused to break, bouncing off marble walls, towering glass windows, and the gleaming bronze company logo suspended above the reception desk. Security applicants lined the hall in expensive tactical gear, custom-tailored suits, polished boots, and military-grade equipment that looked newer than some family cars. Most of them carried themselves with the confidence of men who expected everyone else to notice. Ethan carried nothing except a worn leather folder tucked beneath one arm. His faded denim jacket had been carefully washed so many times that its color had softened into pale blue. His work boots were clean but scarred by years of honest labor. The silver beginning to creep through his dark hair made him look older than his 42 years. Yet his steady gray eyes never searched the room for approval. They quietly measured exits, stairwells, windows, and every person within sight before settling back into calm stillness. A broad-shouldered applicant glanced toward Ethan and smirked. "Wrong building, buddy." Maintenance entrances around back. Several others laughed, grateful someone had spoken the joke aloud. Another leaned against the wall with folded arms. "This is a bodyguard tryout, not a dad's weekend at Little League." More laughter followed, louder this time. Ethan simply thanked the receptionist as she handed him a visitor badge. "Applicant number 27, she said politely. "Training arena is on the 3rd floor." "Thank you, ma'am," Ethan replied with the quiet respect of someone who never believed kindness should depend on status. He stepped toward the elevator without another word. The silence surrounding him somehow made the laughter sound even louder. 3 floors above, the private training arena buzzed with anticipation beneath bright overhead lights. Heavy bags swayed gently in the conditioned air. Thick blue mats stretched across the center of the room while executives, trainers, and security consultants gathered behind a glass viewing wall. At the far end stood Vivian Sterling, founder and CEO of Sterling Global Technologies, one of America's youngest self-made billionaires. Dressed in a tailored charcoal business suit, she carried herself with composed confidence that had earned respect in boardrooms around the world. She wasn't searching for the strongest fighter. She was searching for someone she could trust with her life. As Ethan entered the arena, conversation slowed almost instantly. Several applicants exchanged amused glances. One chuckled under his breath. Then Logan Pierce, undefeated champion of the company's final evaluation program, stepped forward with an easy grin that carried more pride than warmth. "You?" he asked loudly enough for everyone to hear. "You're trying out to protect the CEO?" A ripple of laughter spread through the room again. Logan folded his arms and looked Ethan up and down before shaking his head. "Hope you've got good health insurance, old man." Ethan met his eyes without anger, without embarrassment, and without the slightest need to defend himself. His answer came softly, almost hidden beneath the fading echoes of laughter. "I'm just here for the opportunity." Across the arena, Vivian narrowed her eyes. It wasn't the words that caught her attention. It was the complete absence of fear behind them. The evaluation coordinator called applicant number 27, and Ethan Brooks stepped onto the edge of the training floor without the slightest hurry. Around him, conversations continued in low whispers, each one carrying another quiet judgment. Someone guessed he had wandered into the wrong building. Another insisted he would not last 5 minutes. Ethan heard every word, yet none of them changed the steady rhythm of his breathing. Years earlier, he might have answered. Life had taught him that silence often revealed more character than arguments ever could. While the other candidates stretched, compared certifications, and proudly recounted overseas contracts, Ethan rested on a wooden bench near the far wall. His hands, rough from years of construction work, folded gently over the worn leather folder resting on his knee. Inside were only a few documents, a driver's license, a security license, and a small photograph that never left his side. The picture showed a smiling 12-year-old girl with freckles across her nose and bright blue eyes that reflected endless hope. Lily Brooks. Every decision he made began and ended with her. Earlier that morning, before sunrise painted the Kentucky sky with soft shades of orange, Ethan had quietly prepared breakfast in their modest two-bedroom apartment. Pancakes shaped like little stars had made Lily laugh despite the stack of medical appointment reminders sitting beside the refrigerator. She had looked up from her plate and smiled. "You're going to get the job today, Dad." Ethan smiled back, although he carried no certainty inside his heart. "I'm going to do my best." Lily reached across the table and squeezed his hand with surprising confidence. That has always been enough. Those words followed him all the way to Sterling Global Headquarters. They echoed, now beneath the bright lights of the training arena, far louder than the laughter surrounding him. Across the room, Logan Pierce entertained several applicants by demonstrating flashy combinations on a practice bag. Every strike drew applause. Every confident grin invited more admiration. Ethan barely glanced in that direction. Instead, his attention drifted naturally toward details few others noticed. A loose hinge on an emergency exit. A maintenance worker carrying equipment without an identification badge visible from the front. A security camera whose viewing angle left one narrow blind spot beside a support column. Vivian Sterling watched the room from behind the observation glass with folded arms. Most candidates wanted to impress her with strength. One applicant wanted nothing except an honest opportunity. She found herself studying him again. His posture remained relaxed, but not careless. His eyes moved slowly, deliberately, gathering information rather than attention. It reminded her of experienced professionals she had met years ago during executive protection briefings overseas. One senior consultant standing beside her noticed her gaze. "You are looking at number 27?" he asked. Vivian nodded slightly. "Everyone else wants to be seen," she answered quietly. "He seems more interested in seeing." Before the consultant could reply, the lead instructor stepped into the center of the mat and raised a hand for silence. The conversations faded. Boots settled against polished concrete. Anticipation filled the air like the stillness before a summer storm. Ethan rose calmly from the bench, slipped Lily's photograph safely back inside the folder, and walked toward the line of applicants with the same quiet dignity he had carried through every difficult season of his life. The lead instructor waited until every applicant had formed a straight line across the edge of the mat. His voice carried the calm authority of someone who had spent decades evaluating people under pressure rather than listening to their claims. "Today is not about looking impressive," he said. "Executive protection begins with discipline, judgment, and restraint. Every decision you make reflects whether someone lives safely tomorrow." A respectful silence settled across the room, but it lasted only a moment before Logan Pierce lifted one corner of his mouth into a confident smile. "So, when do we get to see who actually belongs here?" Several applicants chuckled in agreement. The instructor glanced down at his clipboard. "You will begin with observation exercises." Logan sighed dramatically. "Observation? We all know why everyone came." His eyes drifted toward Ethan. Some people probably came for free air conditioning. More laughter echoed around the arena. Ethan remained perfectly still, his expression unchanged. Vivian Sterling watched from behind the glass without interrupting. She noticed something curious. Every time someone mocked Ethan, his attention never drifted toward the person speaking. Instead, he quietly continued observing the room itself. The instructor divided the applicants into small groups and placed different objects around the training floor. They were given 90 seconds to study every detail before turning away and answering questions from memory. Most candidates immediately focused on the obvious. Items. Ethan slowly scanned reflections in the windows, ceiling lights, emergency exits, badge colors, hallway access points, and even the placement of unattended equipment carts. When the exercise ended, the instructor asked simple questions that quickly became more difficult. How many emergency exits? Which camera had the widest viewing angle? Who entered the room after the exercise began? One by one, confident answers turned into uncertain guesses. Logan answered quickly, but missed several details. Ethan answered only when called. His voice stayed calm. 3 emergency exits. One partially obstructed by maintenance equipment. One unidentified visitor entered carrying a toolbox with no visible identification badge facing forward. Camera 4 leaves approximately 3 feet of uncovered space beside the northwest support column. The instructor looked down at his notes, then back up again. Correct. A few applicants exchanged surprised glances. Logan folded his arms. Lucky guesses. Ethan simply nodded once without defending himself. The next exercise involved escort positioning. Candidates paired together and demonstrated how they would guide a client through a crowded public lobby. Most relied on physical positioning and confident commands. Ethan volunteered to play the client first. As he quietly walked through the demonstration area, he gently pointed out blind corners, reflective glass surfaces, elevator bottlenecks, and unnecessary exposure created by decorative furniture. He never criticized another applicant. He merely explained safer alternatives whenever the instructor invited his opinion. Vivian found herself leaning slightly closer to the observation glass. She had attended dozens of security demonstrations over the years, yet few candidates naturally thought several steps ahead without being prompted. Her chief operations advisor noticed her growing interest. "He does not move like someone chasing a paycheck," he said quietly. Vivian kept watching Ethan as another round of whispers spread through the room. "No," she replied softly. "He moves like someone protecting something that matters." Before anyone could reflect on her words, the instructor gathered the applicants together once more. "Observation is only the beginning," he announced. "The next evaluation will test composure under pressure." Logan smiled immediately, convinced the moment he had been waiting for had finally arrived. Across the room, Ethan rested his hands comfortably at his sides. His breathing never changed, his shoulders remained relaxed, and somewhere deep inside his jacket pocket rested the folded photograph of Lily, the quiet reminder that every challenge in this room was only another step toward keeping a promise made across a humble breakfast table. The lead instructor allowed only a brief pause before the next evaluation began. Assistants rolled lightweight training barriers onto the mat, arranging them into narrow corridors that resembled the lobby of a busy corporate headquarters. Portable speakers filled the room with overlapping conversations, ringing telephones, elevator chimes, and the constant murmur of a crowded business day. The atmosphere changed immediately. It no longer felt like a gym. It felt like a place where one distracted decision could become an expensive mistake. "This exercise measures judgment under pressure," the instructor explained. "Your responsibility is not to defeat people. Your responsibility is to move your clients safely while recognizing potential risks before they become problems." Logan Pierce stepped forward with his familiar confidence. Finally, something interesting. He adjusted his gloves and glanced toward Ethan with another amused smile. "Try to keep up, old man." Several applicants laughed again, although this time the sound carried less certainty than before. Ethan offered only a polite nod. "Good luck," he said quietly. Logan seemed almost disappointed by the absence of any argument. The first demonstrations began. Applicants relied on speed, firm commands, and dramatic movements that looked impressive from a distance. Every completed run earned scattered applause from the waiting candidates. Vivian Sterling observed each performance carefully, making notes without expression. Most participants reacted only after instructors introduced unexpected distractions. Very few noticed warning signs before they unfolded. When Ethan's turn arrived, a quiet stillness settled over the room. He accepted a communication earpiece, listened carefully to the instructions, and took his position without rushing. One assistant played the role of the client, while several employees blended into the simulated crowd. The timer began. Ethan did not move immediately. Instead, he spent one calm second studying reflections in the polished glass panels, listening to footsteps behind him, and noticing the rhythm of people crossing the corridor. Only then did he gently guide the client forward. His pace never appeared hurried, yet every change in direction happened moments before another distraction developed. He chose wider paths instead of narrower shortcuts. He positioned the client away from blind corners without making it obvious. Twice he politely altered course because maintenance carts partially blocked emergency access. Once he paused for less than a heartbeat, allowing a rushing group to pass before continuing. Nothing looked dramatic. Everything looked intentional. Behind the observation glass, Vivian lowered her pen. Interesting, she whispered almost to herself. Her chief operations advisor nodded slowly. He never reacts to problems. Vivian kept watching Ethan. No, she replied. He quietly prevents them. The final portion of the exercise introduced a surprise. A staff member carrying a stack of folders deliberately stumbled several feet ahead, scattering papers across the walkway. Several applicants waiting nearby instinctively rushed forward to help gather them. Ethan did not. He first guided his client safely around the unexpected obstacle, positioned her where she could no longer be boxed into the crowded space, and only after confirming the path remained secure did he kneel to help collect the fallen documents. The assistant smiled with genuine appreciation. Thank you. Ethan returned the folders with a gentle smile. Everyone deserves help, he answered. Timing simply matters. Even the instructor allowed himself a faint smile before marking something on his clipboard. Across the room, Logan folded his arms more tightly than before. For the first time that morning, the easy confidence on his face had been replaced by quiet irritation. He could no longer dismiss Ethan as harmless, yet pride refused to let him admit what everyone else was slowly beginning to see. Vivian noticed the change immediately. She had spent years leading companies worth billions of dollars, and she recognized the moment when confidence quietly transformed into insecurity. Without taking her eyes off Ethan, she closed her notebook and spoke softly enough that only the advisor beside her could hear. The real test has not started yet. The lead instructor stepped to the center of the mat as assistants quietly cleared away the training barriers. The arena felt different now. The playful conversations had faded, replaced by the low hum of fluorescent lights and the soft squeak of polished shoes against the floor. Every applicant sensed that the evaluations were entering a new stage. The final exercise before lunch, the instructor announced, measures composure during controlled physical engagement. This is not about overpowering an opponent. It is about judgment, balance, discipline, and knowing exactly how much force is necessary to end a problem without creating another one. Logan Pierce smiled immediately. Sounds like my specialty. He turned toward Ethan before the instructor had even finished speaking. I would like number 27. A ripple of whispers spread through the room. Several applicants exchanged knowing smiles, convinced they were about to witness an embarrassing mismatch. One muttered quietly, "This will be over fast." Another folded his arms with a grin. Ethan looked toward the instructor instead of Logan. "If that is the assignment, I am ready." His calm answer somehow made the room even quieter. Vivian Sterling remained behind the observation glass, watching every expression rather than every movement. She noticed Logan's confidence. She noticed the excitement among the other applicants. Most of all, she noticed Ethan. He showed no sign of pride, fear, or frustration. He simply accepted the moment exactly as it arrived. The instructor reviewed the rules once more. This is a controlled demonstration. The objective is to show restraint, awareness, and professionalism. The exercise ends immediately when one participant establishes clear positional control or the instructor calls a stop. Respect your training partner at all times. Both men acknowledged the instructions. Logan stepped lightly onto the mat, rolling his shoulders with theatrical confidence as scattered laughter and quiet encouragement floated through the arena. Ethan removed his denim jacket, folded it neatly, and placed it on a nearby chair with the same care someone might use when putting away something valuable. Inside the pocket rested Lily's photograph. He glanced at it for only a heartbeat before returning his attention to the mat. The instructor signaled for both participants to greet each other. Logan extended his hand with a smile that looked more competitive than respectful. Ethan accepted the handshake with steady courtesy. There was no tension in his expression, only quiet focus. As they separated, Logan circled confidently, moving with practiced athleticism meant to impress everyone watching. Ethan did not mirror the performance. His feet remained relaxed beneath him. His breathing stayed slow and even. He observed distance, timing, posture, and rhythm far more carefully than appearances. The room became strangely still. Even the applicants who had laughed earlier leaned forward without realizing it. Vivian rested one hand against the glass. Her chief advisor whispered, "He is not preparing to win attention." She answered without looking away. "No, he is preparing to avoid unnecessary mistakes." Logan tested the distance with quick movements, expecting hesitation. Ethan adjusted only enough to maintain comfortable space, never chasing, never retreating farther than necessary. The contrast between them became impossible to ignore. One competitor seemed determined to prove himself. The other appeared determined to solve a problem as efficiently as possible. For several long seconds, nothing dramatic happened. Yet the silence inside the arena grew heavier than any applause had been all morning. Vivian realized the atmosphere had completely changed. Nobody was laughing anymore. Every eye in the room had settled on the quiet father they had dismissed only an hour earlier. And for the first time that day, it was not curiosity they felt. It was respect beginning to replace assumption. The instructor lowered his hand, signaling the controlled engagement to begin. Logan Pierce moved first with the polished confidence everyone expected from the Academy's top-ranked candidate. He advanced with measured steps, testing distance, changing angles, searching for an opening that would impress the executives watching behind the glass. Ethan Brooks answered with almost invisible adjustments, never matching speed with speed, never allowing emotion to guide his choices. To some observers, it looked as though he was simply giving ground. To Vivian Sterling, it looked like someone quietly reading every intention before it fully formed. The room remained silent except for the soft sound of shoes brushing across the training mat and the steady hum of the ventilation system overhead. Logan shifted direction again, attempting to surprise Ethan with a sudden change of pace. Ethan calmly stepped aside, just enough to preserve comfortable space between them. There was no panic, no dramatic movement, only simple efficiency. Several applicants exchanged puzzled looks. "Why is he not doing anything?" one whispered. The instructor answered without taking his eyes off the mat. "He is doing exactly what a protector should do. He is solving the problem with the least amount of risk." Logan's confidence slowly gave way to frustration. Each attempt to pressure Ethan ended the same way. Ethan neither challenged his pride nor accepted the invitation to compete. He simply remained balanced, aware, and patient. Vivian noticed something she had not seen in any previous candidate that morning. Ethan never looked at Logan's hands first. His attention stayed centered, quietly reading posture, breathing, and intent instead of reacting to isolated movement. It was the habit of someone who had spent years making careful decisions under genuine responsibility rather than performing for an audience. Logan finally spoke through a tight smile. "You were just going to keep backing away." Ethan answered with complete calm. "If someone under my protection stays safe, I do not need to prove anything." The words landed with unexpected weight. A few people lowered their eyes. Others stopped whispering altogether. Logan took another determined step, hoping to force the exchange into something more dramatic. Instead, Ethan made one small adjustment in timing and positioning, redirecting the forward momentum with quiet precision. The movement lasted only a moment. There was no display of aggression, no unnecessary flourish, only disciplined control that naturally brought the exercise to a stable conclusion exactly as the instructor had described in the rules. Before anyone fully understood what had happened, the instructor raised his voice. "Stop!" The arena froze. Logan looked surprised more than embarrassed as he regained his footing. Ethan immediately stepped back, offering him respectful space instead of celebrating. Then he extended his hand with the same quiet courtesy he had shown at the beginning. After a brief hesitation, Logan accepted it. Ethan nodded once. "Thank you," he said sincerely. "You pushed me to stay focused." No one laughed. No one applauded. The silence filling the arena carried something far more meaningful than noise. Behind the observation glass, Vivian slowly exhaled. She had expected to evaluate skill that morning. Instead, she had witness character. The strongest impression had not come from a display of physical ability. It had come from a father who refused to humiliate another person even after earning the respect of an entire room. As the instructor marked the final score on his clipboard, he looked toward Ethan with quiet admiration before saying, "Professionalism cannot be taught to everyone. Sometimes it is earned long before anyone walks through the door." The training session officially paused for lunch, but very few people moved toward the buffet tables arranged along the far side of the executive lounge. Most conversations still circled back to the quiet applicant who had changed the atmosphere of the entire evaluation without raising his voice or trying to embarrass anyone. Ethan Brooks retrieved his folded denim jacket, carefully slipped Lily's photograph back into the inside pocket, and thanked one of the facility attendants for refilling the water station before carrying a simple paper cup toward an empty corner overlooking the city skyline. He stood there alone, watching sunlight reflect across neighboring office towers, looking more like a father taking a peaceful moment between responsibilities than a man competing for one of the most prestigious executive protection positions in the country. Behind the observation room, Vivian Sterling remained unusually quiet as members of her executive security committee reviewed score sheets. One advisor spoke first. Applicant 27 exceeded expectations in awareness and judgment. However, there are significant gaps in his recent employment history. Another executive added, construction work, warehouse shifts, private maintenance contracts. Nothing suggests he belongs at this level anymore. Vivian continued, studying Ethan through the glass. Or perhaps everything suggests exactly why he does. The room fell silent. She pressed a button on the conference table. "Run another background review. Not the summary. I want the complete record." Within minutes, an analyst connected to several secure databases. The large monitor displayed Ethan's application file before expanding into archived federal records that had not appeared in the initial screening. The analyst frowned slightly. "That is unusual." Vivian stepped closer. "What did you find?" More files loaded across the screen. Military commendations, instructor certifications, advanced executive protection qualifications, specialized leadership courses. Then another document appeared with several sections previously archived under restricted personnel records. The analyst adjusted his glasses in disbelief. According to this, Ethan Brooks was never simply assigned to protective operations. He helped develop training standards that are still being used by multiple executive security programs today. One advisor slowly lowered his coffee cup. Another leaned forward without saying a word. Vivian read every line herself. There were no headlines celebrating his achievements, no interviews, no photographs seeking attention. The records described a man who consistently accepted difficult assignments, declined public recognition, and repeatedly requested placement where younger personnel could receive opportunities ahead of him. Why would someone with this background disappear into construction work? One executive asked quietly. Vivian kept reading until a family notification report appeared near the bottom of the file. Several years earlier, Ethan had voluntarily resigned after becoming the sole guardian of his young daughter following a heartbreaking family loss. There were no complaints in his personnel file, no disciplinary actions, only one handwritten recommendation from a retiring commander. It read, "If integrity could wear a uniform, it would look like Ethan Brooks." Vivian closed the file slowly. Across the arena, Ethan smiled politely as one of the custodians struggled to carry a heavy supply box. Without hesitation, he crossed the room, lifted one side, and walked with the older man toward the storage hallway. Neither realized anyone was watching. Vivian did. She realized the man who had quietly earned the respect of the training floor behaved exactly the same way when nobody expected anything from him. At that very moment, her private phone vibrated with a high-priority security notification. A confidential message from corporate intelligence appeared across the screen. It warned of a credible concern involving her public schedule that afternoon and recommended immediate reinforcement of executive protection procedures. Vivian read the alert once, then looked through the glass toward Ethan as he returned the empty supply cart with a grateful smile, to the custodian. For reasons she could not fully explain, one thought settled calmly into her mind. The evaluation she had planned for the afternoon was no longer the one that truly mattered. The afternoon schedule resumed with remarkable efficiency. Yet the atmosphere inside Sterling Global Headquarters had changed in ways few people could explain. Conversations were quieter. Smiles were more restrained. The confidence that had filled the training arena that morning had been replaced by careful observation. Vivian Sterling stepped onto the executive floor with two members of her internal security staff, while senior advisors quietly discussed the confidential intelligence alert she had received only minutes earlier. The message contained no dramatic language and no prediction of immediate danger. It simply recommended heightened awareness, because an anonymous communication had referenced her appearance at a charity technology announcement later that afternoon. Most executives considered it another routine precaution. Ethan Brooks did not know the details of the alert, but as he walked toward the reception corridor with the other applicants, something caught his attention. A delivery cart stood several feet away from its designated service entrance. One identification badge, clipped to a visitor's jacket, appeared upside down, making the photo impossible to verify at a glance. A maintenance door that had remained locked throughout the morning now rested slightly open. None of those details proved anything by themselves. Together, they quietly disturbed him. He approached the nearest coordinator with calm professionalism. "Excuse me, sir," he said politely. "Would someone mind confirming that the service hallway is supposed to be open during executive movement?" The coordinator looked surprised, but appreciated the respectful tone. "I will check immediately. No alarm sounded." Nobody ran. The question simply moved through the communication system exactly as good questions should. Within moments, two supervisors confirmed that the door had been left unsecured after a supply delivery. It was quickly closed and inspected without disrupting the event. Vivian observed the entire exchange from across the lobby. Ethan had not attempted to impress anyone. He had not spoken loudly or demanded attention. He had simply noticed something others had overlooked and addressed it with quiet respect. As guests began arriving for the afternoon announcement, another small moment unfolded. A young employee carrying presentation equipment hurried across the polished floor, clearly overwhelmed by the growing crowd. Several cables slipped from the top of her cart, creating a narrow obstacle near the primary walking route. Before anyone else reacted, Ethan stepped forward, gently helped organize the equipment, and suggested a safer path that kept the entrance clear without interrupting the event. "Thank you," the employee said with visible relief. Ethan smiled warmly. "We all help each other." Vivian heard every word. Her chief operations advisor quietly stepped beside her. Most applicants spend all day trying to prove they belong beside you. Vivian watched Ethan thank the employee before quietly returning to the waiting area without expecting recognition. "He keeps proving something far more important," she replied. "He naturally protects everyone around him, even when there is nothing to gain." A few minutes later, the corporate intelligence director approached with an updated report. "The concern appears to have been precautionary," he explained. "Nothing suspicious has developed, but your staff appreciated the additional observations reported by applicant 27. They helped identify several procedural weaknesses before guests entered the building." Vivian nodded thoughtfully. Across the bright marble lobby, Ethan stood near the windows, looking down briefly at the small photograph resting inside his folded wallet before placing it back into his jacket. The gesture lasted only a second, yet Vivian understood exactly what motivated him. He was not standing there because he wanted prestige, applause, or a title. He was standing there because somewhere beyond those glass walls, a little girl believed her father always kept his promises. And for the first time in many years, Vivian realized that the safest person in her company might also be the humblest. Late that afternoon, the remaining applicants gathered once more inside the training arena, where the polished floor reflected the warm glow of the setting sun pouring through the tall glass windows. The excitement that had filled the room earlier had faded into quiet expectation. Nobody seemed interested in boasting anymore. Even Logan Pierce stood with his hands folded in front of him, his confidence replaced by thoughtful silence. The lead instructor stepped forward carrying a single folder. He looked across the room before speaking. Every person here demonstrated valuable skills today. Strength matters. Experience matters. Confidence matters. But none of those qualities matter without judgment and character. His words settled gently over the room. Vivian Sterling walked from the observation area and joined him at the center of the mat. She was no longer evaluating applicants from behind the glass. She wanted every decision to be made face to face. She looked at each candidate before allowing her gaze to rest on Ethan Brooks. When this process began, she said calmly, many people believed the strongest candidate would be the one who drew the most attention. Today, I learned something different. The person I trust most is the one who never asked to be noticed. A deep silence followed. Ethan looked almost uncomfortable receiving so much attention. Vivian smiled softly before continuing. Mr. Brooks, your background speaks for itself. Your experience is extraordinary. But that is not why I chose you. I chose you because every time no one was watching, you still chose respect. You protected people before they knew they needed help. You solved problems before they became emergencies. And you treated every person in this building with the same dignity, whether they were an executive, a receptionist, or a custodian. Ethan lowered his eyes for a moment, humbled more than proud. Thank you, ma'am, he answered quietly. I only tried to do what was right. Vivian handed him a small envelope containing a formal employment offer. Beginning next Monday, I would be honored if you accepted the position of Executive Protection Director for Sterling Global. Ethan accepted the envelope carefully, almost as though it carried more responsibility than reward. Before opening it, he smiled gently. May I make one phone call first? Vivian nodded with a warm expression. Of course. A few minutes later, Ethan stepped into the quiet reception hallway and dialed a familiar number. After the second ring, Lily answered with cheerful excitement. Dad, Ethan could not hide the smile in his voice. Hey, sweetheart, how did it go? She asked. Ethan looked through the windows toward the fading Kentucky sky before answering. Looks like I will be coming home with good news. Lily laughed so brightly that even the receptionist nearby smiled without knowing why. I told you that doing your best was enough. Ethan closed his eyes for a brief moment. You were right. When he returned to the arena, Logan approached him with sincere respect. I judged you before I knew you, he admitted. I was wrong. Ethan shook his hand firmly. We all get second chances. That is what matters. Vivian watched the exchange with quiet admiration. She realized that real leadership was never measured by the ability to stand above others. It was measured by the willingness to lift others with kindness even after earning the right to stand alone. As the lights dimmed and the building slowly emptied, the laughter that had greeted one quiet father that morning had completely disappeared. In its place remained something far stronger than applause. It was respect earned without demanding it, dignity preserved without raising a voice, and the quiet reminder that the strongest person in any room is often the one who has nothing left to prove.